And the great consequence of this is that we cannot achieve happiness. No one who perpetrates evil and remains hard-hearted can be happy. So, that's a shame. Now, go back up. I put in this, it's on page 2, of the notes, page 2, very bottom. I put in this poem by Rabindranath Tagore. He was a Hindu poet, Indian man. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. This is pretty typical Hindu thinking, that compassion for the other, service for others, connection to others is joy. So we can see him, and by the way, I mean, this is not just him, and it's not just Hinduism, although Hinduism is one of the oldest religions on the planet. In fact, it's one of the 3 oldest major religions on the planet. So, and one of the biggest ever. And, but Jesus says this, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Aristotle, Socrates, Gandhi, Saint Teresa, lots of really important people, and then, Buddhism, Taoism, lots of major groups, religious and otherwise, on the planet have maintained this idea that happiness comes from virtue. And virtue, in this important sense, means kindness shown to others, other human beings and other creatures on the planet. So, Aristotle also ties happiness to virtue, and this is just, well, it's not a new idea. And I think that if we think about it, about ourselves, and the times that we have shown kindness, especially the times that we've shown kindness to someone when he didn't really deserve it, at least as far as we were concerned, or we bit our tongue, or held back and tried to be forgiving or patient, I think that in our own lives, we can just look at our own experiences and see that the times that we've chosen to behave with kindness are times that have made us feel a kind of joy that is unsurpassed. And when we give love, and when we're falling in love, and when we experience it, and all those wonderful things, and friendship, I think that that kind of joy is certainly unmatched by the times, the perverse, perhaps, sort of momentary pleasure that we get when we lash out or are vindictive or cruel. We don't seem to get any kind of lasting, deep happiness or flourishing from those behaviors. And if you're just a sociopath, then you don't count as being human. Like, you don't have the capacities that Aristotle was talking about anyway, so it doesn't matter what Ted Bundy experienced, because he was crazy. So this discussion doesn't include anybody like that. And if you look, page 60, then I the next thing after where we were reading about capacity and activity. So you see 60 / section 4, so that's page 60. And where's section 4? Section 4 is on the right-hand column under, so it's the third full paragraph, and section 4 is in the middle of it. Moreover, if happiness comes in this way, it will be widely shared. For anyone who is not deformed in his capacity for virtue will be able to achieve happiness through some sort of learning and attention. When he says that, anyone who's not deformed in his capacity, he's talking about people who, I don't know if, to my knowledge, Aristotle never mentioned, like, psychopaths. I mean, they didn't have those, they didn't use those same words to describe those kinds of people, but of course they existed, because they have always existed. And people, you know, with other serious mental handicaps or disorders that keep them from being able to either be rational or to be moral. And there are people like that. And so anybody who's not deformed in that capacity then has this function. But I'm pointing this out because this is where he at least mentions that there are human beings who are deformed in this capacity. And I've said this before, but the Greeks are not egalitarian. Were not egalitarian at all. So they very deeply believed that people could be deformed in their mental faculties. And, well, I guess they're right about that. So, Ted Bundy is one. That's probably why he was put to death, I would think. So, now the next thing, this next discussion that he has here, it's on page 61, I've written this, the tripartite soul, three-part soul, the Greek notion of our soul, and try not to put some religious idea of soul in here, it's not really like that, just think of it as being like the human self, okay, like, if you want to say something like, well, don't, just self is fine, and everybody is the same self in this regard. It's not like your personal temperament or anything. The point is what human beings are made up of, 3 parts: reason, passions or emotions, and appetites. The proper order for these is that reason should be in control of everything that we do, and our passions need to be honed in such a way, controlled in such a way that they back up reason. So my passions can either control me or I can control them, as we say. My emotions. I can make rash, stupid decisions all the time. I can lash out. I can date unhealthy men who don't treat me well. Rationally, I would say, okay, this is a bad idea, I shouldn't do this, but it feels good right now, or whatever, so I do it, even though I know that that's a bad idea. It's irrational, it's foolish, it's going to just cause more suffering in the end, etc., etc. But we do that stuff anyway. Well, those are instances when rationality is not in control. And it's funny how you really can't be happy when rationality isn't in control, because you make so many stupid decisions that you just compound your suffering. I mean, we put ourselves in positions to suffer more when we act out of our emotions all the time. By the way, he's not making any suggestion that we should eradicate the emotions or the appetites. The appetites are even lower. It's like bodily appetites for food, water, sex. You're never going to get you're never going to eradicate your need for water. How are you supposed to do that? If you're thirsty, you can't rationalize yourself out of the desire for water when you haven't had any water in a day. And if you just decide not to drink any, well, you'll just die. So, I mean, there's no eradication of these things. I remember for the Greeks were a very sexual, sensual people, and they were very interested and amazing, by the way, at art. And but one of the four cardinal virtues is temperance, moderation, all things in moderation. Absolutely, you need to have appetites. Absolutely, you need to have emotions and passions. But you need to control them. You need to have them in moderation. By the way, the Buddha said exactly the same thing. So, yeah, it's fine to fall in love, but keep your head about you. Don't go getting married after you've known somebody for 2 months. That usually is not a good idea. What the hell do you need to be married for? Just date. What's the difference? You're fine. But people do this kind of stuff. Fall in love, but keep your head about you. You don't need to go to these great lengths. You're gonna cause yourself more suffering. And I think that we know this. Like, we don't think that he's crazy in this regard. And he's not. Okay? So the idea here is that if we keep our heads, we are more likely to make... darn it. We're more likely to make wiser decisions that in the long run will be better for us and will give us a greater opportunity at happiness. So, by the way, he's just right about it. I'm old enough now, and I've made enough stupid decisions out of emotion now that he's right. They're right. I know I need to be more rational or reasonable or wise about my decisions, and I'm not, and I regret it every single time. Every time I know I should have done the more reasonable thing, and that if I had, right now I might be more disappointed or something. But in the long run, the happiness and joy that would have afforded would have been unbelievable. Now, we do that all the time. I know I do. So, maybe one of these days we'll get it right. But anyway, that's what he's doing on page 61, the right-hand column, Introduction to the Virtues, and then most of page 62. He's talking about the tripartite soul. So, I don't have the right version of my notes on here. I don't know where they are. So I'll just have to, unless, I do have a few more things. Regardless, I can still talk about it. Anyway, so this is an interesting idea. And it was very intriguing to me. I think the first time I ever studied Aristotle, I was like 20 or something, and yeah, it really hit me, and I said, you know, this is really cool. I like his discussion of how we acquire the virtues. So the first thing to realize is that, nobody is born virtuous. Like, there are no virtuous babies. Like, what's that about? If virtue has something to do with compassion or moderation, is a baby, like, able to... What? No. And here's why babies aren't born virtuous. Because they're really just a bundle of appetites and passions. They don't have that rationality yet. They have the potential. They don't even have the capacity for it yet. I mean, the capacity to illustrate rationality or critical thinking. I don't know any 2-month-old that is rational. That's ridiculous, right? They can't do that. So, they are not virtuous yet. Virtue comes from being rational, first and foremost. So, we have to acquire the virtues later. We're not born with them. So that's the first thing that he says. Page 62, right-hand column, bottom, this new book 2, Virtue of Character. Go to the section 2. Hence it is also clear that none of the virtues of character, that's the kind that he wants to talk about, never mind the other ones, arises in us naturally. For if something is by nature in one condition, habituation cannot bring it into another condition. Normally here I would ask you what he means by that, but since I can't do that, I have to just tell you, which drives me crazy. If something is born in a certain way, you can't change its natural instinct by just having it practice doing things another way. If something is an instinct, then it's natural to it, and that's the way it's going to be. And you can't change it in that particular individual by having them practice. There was, when was this? I've had a number of, well, first of all, my parents are older than me. My parents are 64, and I've had a number of students in my classes who've been older than me too, and they told me about what it was like when they went to school, like middle school and high school and things, and elementary school, back in whatever decade, long before I was born, and that in some elementary schools and things, when a child would be left-handed, they would, first of all, like, smack him, which is always, that's nice, and make him write with his right hand and try to get him to become right-handed. And there's some study that I read that an overwhelming number of the children who they tried to habituate them to become right-handed just never were able to acquire the skill. And they never lost the natural skill to write correctly and properly and beautifully with their left hands. And this is the kind of thing he's talking about. If there's something that comes with us by nature when we're born, you can't just make somebody practice and have them lose that, which is, what it looks like is exactly what happens with those camps where they send gay people to make them not gay. Doesn't have a very good success rate. There's probably a reason why. So, whatever. So then look at the top of 63, very top, section 3, so down a few lines. And so the virtues arise in us neither by nature nor against nature. Rather, we are by nature able to acquire them, and we are completed through habit. So, since we can be virtuous, then we're not born being, like, evil. That's ridiculous. If it was natural that we were just evil, then we wouldn't be able to ever be virtuous, because evil would just be natural to us. But we're born neither virtuous nor evil. We're born neutral, and we have the capacity to acquire virtue, or, by the way, to acquire evil, depending on how we're habituated. So, as Aristotle sees it, we acquire virtue by habit. In other words, by practice. What he really just means here is that practice makes perfect. So all this stuff on the whole right-hand column, you have to make sure that you know all of this. This is really like the meat and potatoes of what Aristotle is doing in terms of the acquisition of virtue. So first of all, let's see, go toward the bottom, right-hand column, section 9, and it's the last section before the very bottom, before the new chapter or whatever is starting there. So, section 9. It is the same with the virtues. Abstaining from pleasure makes us become temperate, moderate. We have things we want things in moderation then. And once we have become temperate, we are most capable of abstaining from pleasures. It is similar with bravery. Habituation and disdain for frightening situations and in standing firm against them makes us become brave. And once we have become brave, we shall be most capable of standing firm. So think about this. Okay, so you decide you want to learn the piano. So you don't know anything about it. You've never played a musical instrument before. You don't know how to read sheet music. I mean, nothing. You're starting all fresh and new, and you go in your first piano lesson, and you're excited. And your teacher sets down a very easy piece, and you struggle through it, and you have to practice all week. I took piano lessons, by the way, when I was a kid, and I hated it. I hated the piano. And I would do just that. I would struggle through it and practice all week, or not really, because I hated it, but let's just say that I actually did. So you'd practice, and after I practiced the piece, obviously it becomes easier and easier. After I practiced the piece, I would go into to the one next week, and I would play it for the teacher, and she'd say, "Good, you learned it, you practiced it, let's try the next piece," and it's a little more difficult. And I would struggle through that one, I would practice it, and I would get better. And as I got better, she would set down more difficult pieces in front of me, and I would pick them up more quickly. It would require less and less practice from me to do well at them. The first time, then, after I'd been playing the piano for many years, I was able to just play almost perfectly a challenging piece of music. So the idea here is that the more I practice, not only do I become better at the activity, I become more skilled, but the next time I have to do the thing, it's just easier and easier. It becomes second nature the more that I practice. And virtue is the same way. So as he says at the bottom there with bravery, at first, I have a lot of students who are afraid to speak in class, and so they'll ask me questions after the class. I don't have, I refuse to do that participation point thing that some professors do, because I know that there are people who have like serious anxiety and stuff, and they have to take medication for that, so I won't do that. You talk in my classes if you want, and if you don't want to, that's okay. So anyway, I know that, and some of my students will say that they're really afraid and they feel stupid, but they really want to get better at that skill because they recognize that it's important, and they'll have questions in the middle of class, and it's difficult material, and they want to be able to ask, and they realize that they forget, and then they don't get as good of an understanding of the material if they can't ask questions about it as we're going over it. So I'll say, okay, well, here's what happens. And you have to just put yourself in a situation that is going to scare you. And the first time you raise your hand in class and ask a question, your face is going to turn red, you're going to be afraid, you're going to feel stupid. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I have a personality that is pretty abrasive, which you guys have probably noticed at this point. I'm an abrasive person, and I'm loud, and I'm opinionated, and I'm not afraid or shy of things, and I have no problem talking to people and things like that. But when I started teaching, I had never spoken in front of a crowd before. That's a whole different thing. And I was afraid. And everybody is staring at you, and the way that you look, and God only knows what they're thinking. And anyway, that scared me a lot. And for the first couple of semesters that I was teaching, every day that I would go into class, I was anxious and nervous beforehand, and I'd be standing up there and feeling really stupid and all kinds of things. But didn't take that long, and it got better. And now I have no problem standing in front of a crowd and talking to people. I have no problem with public speaking. And I thank God for that, because it's a necessary skill and one that most people are terrified of doing. So I got to have it, so thank God. But it is, it's not just that you get better at it. It becomes second nature. At first, you do this, let's say, brave act. You put yourself in this situation where you have to act bravely in order to get through it. But you're terrified the whole time. You hate it. You kind of stink at it. You're not really that skilled at being brave. You're shaking and nervous. So you're doing a brave act. But that doesn't yet make you a brave person. The first time I played a piece on the piano, I was not therefore a pianist. It wasn't the 5th time or the 27th time or anything. It wasn't until sitting down and playing was so second nature that I didn't even have to really think about it anymore. We become brave when we don't have to try to do the brave thing. When bravery is part of who we are, such that in a given situation, without even really having to think, we will just be brave. And we will know exactly what that requires of us in that given situation, because bravery could manifest itself differently in different situations, right? So this is what he means by the acquisition of virtue through habit. You have to just keep practicing a virtuous action. And once it becomes second nature, once you just are, like you just spew compassion and moderation and bravery and whatever from you without even having to think about it. It's just the way that you act toward others or in life. That is when you are a brave man or woman. That is when you are a compassionate person. When you don't have to try and struggle to be compassionate. Now, for my own part, I try to work on, I try to work on forgiveness. I try to work on patience, but that's not coming as easily to me as forgiveness. I notice I have very little patience. I have not acquired that virtue. And in part, it's because every time I need to show patience, I'm not practicing, because I will immediately lash out with impatience. And then I look back and I'm like, damn, that could have been an instance when I could have practiced patience, such that if I keep doing it and doing it and doing it, it would become second nature. But my emotions keep controlling me instead of my reason. I don't have that opportunity to stop myself and say, be quiet. Just don't say anything until you cool down and you can respond more patiently. I get too upset and then I just say whatever I say, and it's no good. But forgiveness is something else, and I think it's because somebody does something bad and I just have the time to sit there and think about it for days, and to think about where they were coming from and why they could have done that and stuff. There's just more time. So forgiveness has been easier for me to acquire and to practice. And I'm not a forgiving person. Like, that is not part of my nature yet. But it is becoming, for me, easier and easier and easier to think about the people who do something bad to me, or, so people who do something bad. It's becoming easier and easier and easier for me to just say, I know that that person was suffering, and I know that that's why he did it, and to keep that at the forefront of my mind. And that is, it's not second nature yet. No, not at all. But it's getting there. I can see it in myself, and I've made a real effort I've put forth a real effort to acquire that virtue by practicing. But the only reason I could have done that is because I thought through it first. Remember, the function of a human being is activity of the rational soul in accord with virtue. I had to first think through, what are the virtues? Is forgiveness a virtue? I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a moral thing to do? Okay, I think yes. And for these reasons, not just because Jesus says so. I have reasons that I have given. I have thought it through. And I agree with Jesus. And that's awesome. But I'm not just going to take his word for it. Nobody else's either. I'm going to take my critical examination's word for it. So I had to think through that, decide it is a virtue, and it is worthy to pursue, because, man, I'll tell you what, holding grudges does not make me happy. As much as I might like him for a day or something, it doesn't make me happy. It doesn't make me better. It doesn't make the other person better. It sucks. It's a heavy load to bear. I'm so tired. It takes so much energy to hate and to be cruel, especially to the people I care about. It takes so much energy to hurt them. And I was like, ugh, this is just nuts. Let's just figure out how to be happy together. So there are good reasons why it's worthwhile to acquire the virtues. And I'll tell you what, it does make things happier. It is better. But it takes a while. And look what he says here. This is very important. Make sure you know this stuff too. Go back up, right-hand column, section 6, which is the first full paragraph. First, then, we should observe that these sorts of states, the virtuous states, naturally tend to be ruined by excess and deficiency. We see this happen with strength and health. For we must use evident cases, blah, 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 blah. For both excessive and deficient exercise ruin bodily health. Okay, he's right about that. If you don't have enough exercise, your muscles will atrophy or something. You're not going to be healthy. If you have way too much, your body can't handle that. I mean, our bodies are made to only handle so much. I mean, they need their rest and whatever. All things in moderation. So too much and too little exercise will ruin one's health. And similarly, too much or too little eating or drinking ruins health. Also true. Whereas the proportionate amount produces, increases, and preserves it. All things in moderation. The same is true then of temperance, bravery, and other virtues. For if, for instance, someone avoids and is afraid of everything, standing firm against nothing, he becomes cowardly. But if he is afraid of nothing at all and goes to face everything, he becomes rash. Etc., etc., etc. So his point here is that in order to find the virtue, you have to see that it is the mean between excess and deficiency, too much and too little. And how do you see that? You figure it out by thinking through it with the old noggin, right? Activity of the rational soul in accord with virtue. Okay? So that's called the mean. The virtue is always the mean, the middle ground between excess and deficiency. Now, this is important. Go to page 64. Left-hand column, the new chapter, Virtuous Actions versus Virtuous Character. Section 2. Surely actions are not enough. Virtuous actions. So I act bravely. That's a virtuous action. Even in the case of for it is possible to produce a grammatical result by chance or by following someone else's instructions. To be grammarians, then, we must both produce a grammatical result and produce it grammatically. That is to say, produce it in accord with the grammatical knowledge in us. Here's what he's saying. I could do a brave action by chance. It just so happens. And in fact, I'm not brave. I'm a total coward. I just sort of stumbled into it, and it ended up being a brave thing. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to. I had no desire. In fact, I wanted to run the other way, but it just happened. Who is going to say, then, that I'm a brave person? Clearly, I'm not. Right? That doesn't work. Or, as he says, by following someone else's instructions. Here's one thing I can't do at all. I have no talent in painting. I am not a painter. Not in any way. But, man, I can churn out a really nice picture with those paint by numbers. It looks terrific because I'm following someone else's instructions. Well, that doesn't make me a painter. And I can, they have those ones where you can, it's a paint-by-number version of famous paintings by Monet or Picasso or somebody. And I can do those, and they look fantastic. Does that make me one of these great painters like those guys? No, of course not. It has to be from me. Right? It has to be my skill, my talent. I have to know how to paint. I have to have that talent. If I do a brave act, it's only, I'm only a brave person because I've done that brave act if I knew that it was brave. If I chose to do it because it was brave, then I'm a brave person. So, look at the top, very top of the right-hand column. First, he, that is a virtuous person. If you are going to be a virtuous person, this is the criterion. First, he must know that he is doing virtuous actions. Sometimes people say, wow, you did a really nice thing there. And I say, huh? What'd I do? I didn't do anything nice. What are you talking about? Well, didn't you notice how happy you made her by saying that? I was like, oh, I wasn't trying to make her happy. I was just talking. That doesn't seem like I'm a good, kind person then. If I didn't even know that I was doing something good, that's not a good person, okay? So he must know that he's doing virtuous actions. Second, he must decide on them and decide on them for themselves. I have to have decided to actually do it. It can't just be an accident or happenstance. And I can't decide, okay, well, I'm going to do this because it gets me into heaven. Or it keeps me out of hell. You're not virtuous, then nope. Nope. Because you want a reward or you want to avoid a punishment, that doesn't mean you're a good person. Because if there were no reward or punishment, then I guess you wouldn't have a reason to do those things. Which means you're not a good person if you're not willing to do those virtuous things unless you get rewarded for it. So there's that one. And third, he must also do them from a firm and unchanging state. And this suggests, by the way, that if it's a firm and unchanging state, first of all, it's not my passions or my appetites, because those are consistently changing. A firm and unchanging state in me is my reason, because reason is that which has the capacity to understand truth. And truth, for an ancient Greek, is firm and unchanging. But also, that means that I have a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's not just liable to, today I feel like it's a virtue, today I want to do it, but tomorrow I don't care. And the next day I might feel like I want to forgive and it's a good thing. And then next week I don't really care much about forgiving people. And the week after I change. Okay, that is not a virtuous person. And what I really appreciate about this too is that we already seem to think these things. When we say that he's a good person, we seem to mean that he does good things for a reason. And it's because he knows that they're good and why. And he can explain to us why. And that he does them for themselves and not to try to impress the girl or to get money or to go to heaven, but he does them because they're good, because he wants to, because he takes real pleasure in them. And he does them all the time. And he feels like this is the right thing, and I've hit on a real truth. And I will always want to be this kind of person. That is what we think is a good person. And that can be acquired by any of us, assuming none of us are deformed in our capacity for virtue. Now, go to, this is important, look at this, page 65. Left-hand column, last paragraph, which is section 10. By virtue, I mean virtue of character, for this is about feelings and actions, and these admit of excess, deficiency, and an intermediate condition, that mean. We can be afraid, for instance, or be confident, or have appetites, or get angry, or feel pity, and in general have pleasure and pain, etc., etc. Section 11, super important. But having these feelings at the right times, about the right things, toward the right people, for the right end, and in the right way, is the intermediate and best condition, and this is proper to virtue. So his suggestion here is that we can feel all of these different things. I mean, he lists anger and appetite and confidence and fear. But you can do those rightly or wrongly. Those can be virtues or not. So fear is a virtue if it's a good idea for you to be afraid of this thing. If it's wise to be afraid of it. There are some things that are not really wise to be afraid of, and there are other things that should give us real pause, and we should really be afraid of them. It wouldn't be so wise for me all the time to just walk around at night alone. And that pisses me off because I don't like, just because I'm a woman, having to just be a victim like that. That pisses me off. And I want to just walk around alone on purpose to illustrate that I should be able to and not have to be worried just because I'm a woman. But it is wise to proceed with some caution, and I recognize that. Hell, even as a man, it's not like men don't get mugged and shot on the street. So, it is wise to proceed with some caution and have a healthy amount of fear, okay? Otherwise, you're rash, and that's not good. Confidence, too, is the same idea. You don't, I mean, there are people who are overly confident. And that's not a good idea, because there are some things about which we should be a little wary. And anger, this is my favorite. Sometimes it's right to be angry. Like Voltaire says, at the injustices of the world. If you are not getting angry at injustice, you're not doing your duty. You are only perpetuating the status quo. And that is disgusting. There are injustices happening all around us, all the time, in this country, everywhere else, to human beings, to animals, to children. If that doesn't make you angry, what are you doing in your lives? We have to get angry at injustice. But then there are stupid things to get angry about. The guy who cuts us off on the freeway. Well, half the time, people don't even realize that they do it. It's an accident. He doesn't know that you're angry. He doesn't have to deal with it. You just do. It's not helping the situation, so that's stupid to be angry about. But there are other things that should require anger of us. So, etc., etc., etc. Now, look at the last page, 67. Left-hand column, section 2. That is why it is hard work to be excellent. For instance, in each case, it is hard work to find the intermediate. For instance, not everyone, but only one who knows, finds the midpoint in a circle. So also getting angry, giving and spending money is easy and everyone can do it. But doing it to the right person, in the right amount, at the right time, for the right end, and in the right way is no longer easy, nor can everyone do it. Hence, doing these things well is rare, praiseworthy, and fine. So, virtue is difficult, and it is the function of our lives to pursue it, and it is the only thing that can give us real happiness. And I love Aristotle, and I think that he gets some of that right.